downtown. Most folks thought that up was down. We all lived and gave our soul, did it all.
Looking to the biopharmacy building and the new hospital, and have housing. You've heard a lot about housing, where we're talking about essentially privatizing our housing. That's been occupying us for the last 6 months. I have assorted oddities like the bookstore and the post office, so if you have any complaints about those, feel free as well. So, about 1,000 employees within facilities. We're about a little over 10% of the staff of the University of Kentucky. Everything from maintaining the grounds to the heating plants that you saw yesterday, to building operators, to day-to-day housekeepers that clean the facilities, and all of them are very dedicated. I'll invite you to our natural gas plant as well. So that is located off of Virginia Avenue at Press Avenue. Let me do a couple of things. I want to not present this as a seminar or lecture. I really like ongoing questions, so feel free to interrupt at any time. Ask some issues that are important to you, and we can digress, so I'm very open to that. I want to, we passed out this 4 or 5 page packet, which is Energy Use at UK. I'm going to use that as a starting point, and I think the whole thrust of my discussion tonight will be, if you were in my position, what would you do? Where would you go? Where would you take energy at the University of Kentucky over the next 20 years? Or more importantly, where would you take the energy discussion over the next 5 years? And I want to talk about the issues that we're facing, the issues that the nation is facing, the issues that people talk about, well, there's alternatives, so let's honestly talk about some of those alternatives tonight. And then I want to come back to a little history of particularly greenhouse gas regulation at the national level and at the state level, and the uncertainty that has produced for those of us that run utility plants and those of us that have to make decisions now in the near term. As you all know, and I think I appreciated your nonpartisan stance, if nonpartisan is non-political or whatever you want to call it, energy and how we produce energy, how we use energy, is one of the most political issues dividing the nation today. And I don't see it solving itself in the next 2 to 3 years. But in the next 2 or 3 years, all of us that are running these plants have to make certain decisions. So we're going to give you some of the information that we have at our disposal. I want you all to think, what would you do? Talk to me about what you think we ought to do, and have a dialogue on that question. Let me start with energy use at UK. Shane, actually, I'd like to go to the next slide first. Shane Tedder will run this for me.
Yeah, chief computer.
I think I can talk loud enough that I don't need to.
Where do you want to start?
I want to talk at the bar graph first, or the pie graph first. Next sheet. When we talk about carbon footprint as an institution, this was one of the most important things to me. What produces our carbon footprint? 64% of it is our electrical consumption that we purchase from Kentucky Utilities. Kentucky Utilities is primarily a coal-burning utility, although it is increasingly switching to natural gas as regulations kick in. Our coal combustion accounts for 26%. But our coal combustion has probably been more political in nature on campus than our electrical consumption. So most of the discussion, the coal off-campus question, focuses on what I see as one of our minor footprints. It's major, but it's the minority portion of our carbon footprint. So when I look at what we can do, coal is not always the first thing I point to. Electrical consumption is the thing I tend to point first at and try to get a handle on. Go back to the slide, if you will, now. This is what we do. In terms of coal burned on page 1 of your report, as you can see, we run about 40,000 more or less tons of coal a year. Although right now, given the price of natural gas, we're probably burning, John, are we burning more natural gas at this point, or about 60-40 maybe?
We actually shut coal boiler down today because of prices. We're burning about 50-50.
About 50-50 coal versus natural gas. We're price driven. We buy natural gas on the open market. We sometimes look extraordinarily genius in buying into the future, and other times we look okay. But right now, natural gas is very cheap. From an environmental standpoint, most folks will say, well, natural gas is half as bad as coal, but it's still not great. But I want to talk about what's available to us. And again, it's the decisions that we face and what you all face as a user here. Our cost of coal, as you can see, fluctuates up and down. We watch that price. We watch our price of natural gas. We rebid coal when we think it's to our favor. We buy natural gas, as I say, through a buyer. And we watch that mix of coal and gas very closely. On electrical usage, we are a consumer of purely the electric that we buy from Kentucky Utilities. The most important thing is the cost of electricity going straight up. And that will go continually up. Right now, we're projecting a 3% cost increase over the next year in electricity. We're assuming over the next 5 to 6 years, as Kentucky Utility puts on more pollution control equipment, that cost could go up 12 to 15% or better higher. So the cost of electricity to us is probably our biggest thing as an institution. As you can see, we're buying just under $20 million in 2010. We're very close to $20 million right now, or maybe even a little better this year with the new hospital coming online. You can also see how we've increased our natural gas burn. Our newest plant, which we put on, we built roughly 2 or 3 years ago to accommodate the construction of the hospital primarily, even though all our plants are tied together and our systems are tied together, is 100% natural gas. Ultra low NOx burners, state-of-the-art, and very few people tour our natural gas plant, as I said. But it's we did that for a couple reasons, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Number one, coal right now and the regulations governing coal burning are very, very uncertain. The federal government has been unclear on what they're proposing on that. It's been a political battle between Republicans and Democrats, not arguing who's right or who's wrong. It's just been a political battle, which leaves us in the middle wondering what we should in fact do. What should we build to? What will be the standard in 2 years, 4 years, 5 years? Go on one more slide. Then we'll. Let me actually, I want to talk next about what fuels we have. And we have a number of groups on campus that have historically said, well, switch to a sustainable fuel. Could you burn switchgrass? Could you burn tree residue, biomass? What could you burn on campus that would be sustainable as various people define sustainable? One of the things to point out right now is that Kentucky, primarily because of its coal, has historically had one of the lower rates of electricity usage in the country, cost-wise, and as a result, we have one of the higher usage rates in the country of electricity. So what are the alternatives? I don't know if you all have looked at these maps. They're national maps, but they tell a lot about what's going on in the country. Wind, Kentucky doesn't show up as a viable option for wind. I think we did
How would wind heat the buildings?
How would it heat it?
Right.
I think we're talking more energy in the broad sense, from electricity to everything.
Well, I mean, I thought part of this discussion was burning coal on campus, and if we're burning coal to produce heat for the buildings, wind doesn't help you there. And I'm not trying to detract from what you're saying at all. I'm just.
Wind would take, again, back to the 66% of our carbon footprint of electricity.
Okay.
And if you're trying to reduce carbon footprint, if that's the goal, which I think is a goal, then you have to look at the whole picture. And so wind as an option has never been there. For those that have traveled up I-65 to Chicago and see the wind farms, it would be a great trip for this club. They are monumental. Probably 5 to 10 miles in all directions. These are major wind turbines. They just come upon you on the horizon and you say, wow. But you can see why as you go toward Chicago. Next slide. Photovoltaic, again, we tend to be on the lower side of that as an option in Kentucky. Again, it points to why the solar farms that they've talked about, again, giant facilities in many cases are in the West. Next slide.
Oh, wow, that's doing that.
Apparently, we are not going to give geothermal to the south, but
See if I can flip those are a little bit.
geothermal, what this says is, while it's not great in Kentucky, it is a viable option in various ways to do a lot with. And it does have options for heating and cooling buildings, primarily in the geothermal area.
Good.
Oh,
You've got 9 minutes.
You got about 9 minutes. Before it fully implodes.
Shane will have to do a little dance here. Our newest building on campus, out on the Alumni Drive, which is a child care facility that's being constructed in cooperation with the Child Development Council of the Bluegrass, is geothermal in our newest building. But it shows that that's a viable option. So you can't go to the last slide, or can you?
We'll see. Doesn't like me right now. So.
Okay. Anyway, I think if you want copies of these slides, Shane can give them to you. But what it points out again is always that viable options in Kentucky. The next one was biomass, as I recall. We don't have a lot of industries in Kentucky that produce a biomass currently. And so that shows up again as Kentucky being somewhat weak in the biomass area. Our manager of utilities and I are meeting tomorrow with Keeneland that has pelletized horse muck they want us to burn in the boilers. We're not clear on what that would be. We know what it looks like. Cost-wise, it looks like it would cost us actually more. So, but we do meet with folks that have options to strictly coal. All right, that's where we are in looking at options. Let me just talk about greenhouse gas regulations over the last few years. When President Obama came in, he had run on the issue that he was going to have cap and trade and some serious legislation to eliminate carbon gas. It was passed, as you may recall, in the spring of 2009 by the House and killed very shortly afterwards by the Senate. Then Congress looked at the age-old question of whether the original 1970 Clean Air Act could be construed to deal with greenhouse gas emissions as well. The Clinton administration said it could. The Bush administration said it could not be construed to deal with greenhouse gas emissions. There were lawsuits. Finally, in 2007, the Supreme Court said, yes, you can use the Clean Air Act to deal with greenhouse gas emissions. Now that the EPA under Obama is starting to use the Clean Air Act to do that and look at major burners of coal, as I say, we're relatively minor, but major burners like utility companies, the issue has been stopped by, I think there's 100 lawsuits right now pending. Some saying the EPA is moving slow, some saying the EPA is moving too fast, but I think there's about 100 lawsuits. So in the middle of all that is a real uncertainty, but nevertheless, the EPA has moved on, saying we are going to regulate greenhouse gases. We're going to regulate utility companies. But they were supposed to have regulations last fall. They said they couldn't get them done. They moved them forward a little bit. They moved them forward further. So it leaves